So now it's time to get started with generating endless levels. So the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to track our car. So we need to know where the car is in the level in order to build all of the sections ahead of the car. So let's tag the car as player. Then we can access it through code and find it. And then let's actually structure this a little bit more. So let's create some folders here and we'll call it car. And put in the car there. And then let's do another one for input so we know. Unity decided that it needed to change or compile, so well. And then we can start with our endless. Oh, come on. Endless. Alright, so let's create a script here. And it is the script that will handle the endless level. So an endless level handler, and let's open that in Visual Studio. In our endless level handler we need to add our prefabs, so we add a section prefab, and it's going to be an array so that we can add multiple different prefabs to get that feeling that it's actually not just looping everything all the time. And we need the game to run efficiently, so we can't instantiate them and destroy them all the time, because that will create lag spikes in the game and we don't want that. So we will create a pool instead, and we will call it sections pool, which will consist of 20 game objects. So this section pool is going to be all of our objects that we can pick from. And it will be a variation of the objects that we have here. You might want to increase the size of this to be a larger value, dependent on how many section prefabs you're going to have. But we can start with a smaller value and then increase it as we go along. Then we are going to add more sections, and these are the sections that will actually be rendered. So these are sort of visible in the game world. And how it works is these sections will be picked from the sections pool. So it will select an object which is available and then put them in here and render them on the screen. And once we have passed a certain point, it will discard the section that we have and take another one from the pool. Okay, and then we need a few more things. So we need to be able to track our car. So let's add our player or transform, player car transform, and we will find this through code. And then when we are running this, we don't want to use an update function to update whenever we are going to change our sections here, because we don't need to do it every frame. So instead we are going to use a coroutine, and to make sure that our coroutine is not generating garbage, we are going to create a new wait for seconds, wait for 100 milliseconds, and do it as a new. If you do this, a new wait for seconds inside your coroutine, it will generate some garbage, and as we're running this all the time, that builds up over time. So instead we create it once and reuse it. And then one final thing is going to be some information about our sections. So we need to know how long our sections are. And right now they are a length of 26. So that is used so that we can stack them after each other. In our start, we want to find the player's car. So we do game object, find objects with tag player, and take the transform and store it as player car transform. Then we can determine where the car is in the game world. Next is that we need to create our pool here and fill it with game objects. So let's add a integer prefab index. And the reason why we have a prefab index here is we are going to loop through our sections prefab, and it could be that this is actually smaller than the sections pool that we're filling, and in that case we wanted to loop around and start over again. So now we need to create our pool. So what we will do is we'll make a for loop from 1 or from int 0 to the section of the length, and then just iterate through it. And then we need to actually instantiate our object. So let's go instantiate section pool, and then we'll use our index here, and we will assign it to our section pool. So this will loop through everything. And then we want everything in our pool to start as disabled. We don't want to see them, so we'll take the pool and the pool object and set it to active false. Then we can't see it. Then we need to increase our prefab index, so it increases it by 1. But at the same time, we also need to track that we don't actually go outside of our index here. So we need to keep that within the index. So let's check that. If the prefab index is larger than section prefab's length -1, then we'll put it to 0. So that will create our section pool so that we have that and it's allocated. Then we need to create our sections. So we need to add these sections that we have here, the 10 first, and we will iterate from 0 until the length of it and fill it up. And we will pick objects from our sections pool, but we need to do that randomly. So we don't want to create it in a sequential order, because then you will feel that, yeah, the game is just looping, it's the same all the time. So we need to create a function to get us a random section from our pool. So let's actually get rid of our update, because we will use our own update. And let's do a game object, get a random section from pool. And what we will do is, first of all, we will just pick a random index. So we'll take our the range of our section pool and say, okay, you know what, we're gonna pick just a random index, anything inside our pool here. And then we are going to do sort of a brute force check to find something that is suitable. And first of all, we need to set, okay, have we found a new section? And we'll do a while loop. If we haven't found a new section, then we will just keep on running this while loop. So you need to be a little bit careful with while loops, because they can create endless loops. So you need to make sure that this actually ends, because if we leave the code as this and run it in Unity, it will never exit, and that could also create performance issues. So be careful about loops or while loops. And then, okay, so the criteria for an object to be acceptable is that it needs to be not visible. So everything that we add in the pool to start is not visible. So we need to find an object here. So we will check the sections pool, the random index that we have. Is it active? If it's not active, then it means that we actually found our new section. So is new section found? We set that to true. If it's not, then we need to keep on looking. And we will take our random index that we started, and just instead of picking a new random index and hoping that that is available, we are going to do it a little bit smarter, or I think at least. So we will just add 1 to it, random index ++, so that gets us into the next position of the array. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we have not gone outside the size of our array here. So if we are outside, then we're starting over. So this will eventually, after a few tries, find a new section that is available. And that will become, it will loop around and do this check again, and it will become true, and it will exit our loop here. And then the only thing we have left to do is actually return it. So return section loop random index. So that gets us a random section. So let's actually use our random section here. So now that we have it, we can get our random section from the pool as the first thing that we do. Okay, so now we have our random section. We need to move it into place. So how do we do that? We'll take the random section that we have here and change the transform's position, and we'll make a new vector 3, and we will use the same position in the X direction. We will not move it up and down in the Y direction, and we will take our I variable times section length, so it actually fills up in the Z direction into the camera. And then once we have positioned it, we can actually activate it. So we'll set it to active true. And then we will set our section, because now we have our random game object here, but we need to actually set it inside our sections as well. So sections of the I from the loop, we'll set it to the random section. So when we're looping through all of this, it means that we will then have filled our sections object with random objects from our pool here. So that's cool. But the limitation is that this will only run once when we are starting up, and then nothing else will happen. So it will create 10 sections, well, that's not enough to make it an endless game. So we need to create our coroutine. So our coroutine is the function that will take care of actually checking if we have passed a section and if it's time to create a new section ahead of the player. So let's create an I enumerator, because it's going to be a coroutine. Update list often, and then actually I will add a CO to it, so I know that it's a coroutine. And then we are going to say, okay, you know, while true, so all the time, we are going to run this, and we need a yield return. So we will use our yield return wait for 100 milliseconds. So that will use our variable that we create here, which saves some garbage collection, because it's not creating a new object every time. All right, and then we actually need to perform some update here. So let's create a function update sections positions, and let's call that from our coroutine. Okay, and let's actually start our coroutine. So once we have done all of this, we can say, okay, start coroutine, and then we have it here. So it is starting up. So now that we have started up and it's running and it's updating every 100 milliseconds, we can check our positions here. And we are going to loop through our sections that we have on screen. And we are going to say that, okay, you know, if our section here is behind the car, so how we do that is we're checking if the sections of the I that transform in the Z direction minus car's positions Z direction, if that is less than minus our section length, then it means that we have actually passed a section and it's far enough behind the user or the player's car for us to actually reuse it. So what we will do is we will take our last section's position. So that is going to be the last position that we had of the object that is currently in our sections. So we are storing its position so that we know that, okay, the section had this position before. And I'll explain why that is important in a little bit. But the first thing we do is then we say, okay, the section that we have just passed, let's disable it. We are going to say that it's no longer visible for the player. And then we need to grab a new random section from our pool here. So we're grabbing a new random section and we're putting it into our section variable. And then we are going to move it into place ahead of our player instead. So now it is behind the player and we want it to be in front of the player. So we are taking the sections transforms position and we're making a new vector 3, and we're keeping the last positions the X direction. And then we are actually going to say that, okay, let's actually not move it to -100 in the Y direction. Let's put it at 0 to start with. So it is on the same plane as the player. And then we need to move it ahead. So we are taking this section's last position plus the section length times how many there are in the section. So this will effectively put it ahead of all of the other sections. So this will then be ahead of the player. If we are moving it from behind the player until ahead of the player. And once we have that, we can actually activate it again and say that it's actually visible. So let's save this and let's take it for a spin in Unity. So let's remove our endless sections, and in our main camera, let's use our endless level handler. And it needs our sections prefabs here. So let's go into our prefab, and we only have one, but let's use that. And then save, and let's try it. Okay, so if we look at our scene view, we can now see that, okay, we have our sections here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's all of them. And then we have some which are disabled. That's from our pool. So we have a few ones that are inactive. Okay, so if we, hold on, let's move our game view. So if we run our player here, we can see that, okay, we have reached a certain point and it gets removed and it is put ahead of the player. So now we effectively have our endless loop here, and it's quite effective because it's not instantiating and it's not deleting objects. But it's totally boring because, well, it's just running forever without anything really happening. So we need to enhance our prefab, our endless section base, and the base object, I like to keep it as clean as possible and then create variants from it. And one part is like the edge of the level here. We need to add some foliage or something to ensure that it's actually you can't see outside the side here, and we'll come back to that in a little bit later. But let's first create some buildings and things closer to the road, and we'll do that in actually variants. So let's take our endless section here and let's change it a little bit. So we need some objects here. Let's go into our buildings here, and I don't know, let's pick building A, and let's actually create a child here, call it buildings. Or actually, now we can do it, buildings. And let's apply this to our main prefab here, and then we need a building. So building A, let's pick that, and that will be a child. And let's take our building and we will rotate it 180 degrees so we see the front of it. And then let's actually add our mesh collider to it. So we have a mesh collider on it, and if we mark it as convex, we can see that, okay, it's actually taking all of the edges of it, which we don't want. We just want it to bake around all of the triangles. And a mesh collider is a little bit expensive. If you want to optimize it, you can actually either do a mesh that is much simpler, or you can approximate it with boxes. But we are sort of going to be a little bit lazy and say that it's okay to use a mesh collider. And then we are going to reduce it a little bit in height, so it just goes above the ground. And then, because we're going to reuse a lot of these, it's a good idea to make a prefab out of them, because we want to change something later on, it becomes easier. So let's add a folder here, call it buildings, and the building APF, and make a prefab out of it. And then let's just reuse it a little bit, something like this. It doesn't matter at this point how it looks, because we will change it anyway. All right, there we go. So let's take our section here and prefab. Let's create a folder for it and endless sections. Move our base in there and then make a variant and name it something clever. I don't know. Center houses. And then let's start again from the base, and then we will add something else, some other type of building. Box B, no, building B, maybe, building C, C, D, E. Doesn't matter, let's just pick one. It's hard to pick when you have so many good ones. Yeah, I think H is a taller building, so let's add that under buildings. And again, let's rotate it 180 degrees so it looks good. And let's add that, and we'll do the same thing, mesh collider, and move it down a little bit. There we go, and create a prefab from this. And then let's move this around a little bit, put it here, maybe actually rotate it a bit. So something like that. Actually, we'll go with fixed coordinates on 90 degrees. So it becomes nice and square against the camera. Something like that, move it outside. And yeah, I think that will be enough. So now we have our variants here, and let's just rename it. Into something clever. You should use better names, but I can get away with it for now. So let's make 3 sections here, and we'll use our new variants. Alright, save, and let's go. Way! So now we have our nice houses, and we can see that they are appearing sort of in front of the player, and it's random, but there are too few variations, so it doesn't feel very random. And we can actually hit something, but nothing happens, and well, now I'm stuck because I can't reverse. So in the end we will blow the car up and the game will be over when we hit something. I'd like to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters. It helps us with every single contribution that we can get. So please consider supporting us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.